Going to talk about two things today. One, the opportunities that are available with moving and migration to cloud infrastructure, as we've spoken just all day today, and then two, the challenges that are associated with it. And if you've been to some of these Angel Beats, you've seen these first few slides quite a bit. So I'll go over these quickly. What I want to talk about is just the traditional challenges in security as it relates to cloud infrastructure, public cloud adoption. And typically it boils down to two things. It's lack of visibility and a low degree of automation. Right? There's quick, high, agile, fast development that happens in DevOps environments and with migrations to the cloud and with multiple releases. And there's not a lot of visibility into the teams that are doing it, as well as automation that's tied to it. So what ends up happening is you have to decide, are you going to stay fast or are you going to be secure? The reality is what you need to be is move fast and be secure, right? You need to weave or overlay or really just put in security into the DevSecOps component of DevOps, right? SEC, security. It can't be a road bump, can't be a swim lane, can't be a doorstop. Has to truly be weaved in. What Microsoft has done a good job of is telling you what and where your responsibilities lie. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, why does cloud responsibility models have anything to do with my DevOps process? Well, the answer comes with respect to a couple of different options. And the first one is understanding the infrastructure that you're building and that your DevOps team is building in the cloud environment is crucial. And if you don't do that, if you don't understand what's being created and how it's being created, you're going to suffer a lot of what's called misconfigurations or issues that are tied to the infrastructure that you're building. So Microsoft does a good job of publishing what's called their shared responsibility model. And there's a kind of a line here. It's a thick line, but there's a line here that defines what's your responsibility versus what's their responsibility. Microsoft also does a fantastic job of talking about platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and on-premises, and who and where and what the responsibility that you have is. And if you remember back in the old days, the open systems interface model, there are a couple of, I'd say parallels between what happened with the 7 layers of the OSI model and what's going on with the responsibility that's tied to cloud. And if you think about the way that things were done the old way, rack and stack, procure, plug in, connect, hardware team, software team, network team, database team, you name it team, middleware team, right? All being involved in the process and not on top of the 3 to 6 week procurement process of provisioning and building a server. And then, odds are you over provisioned it, and so you're paying for expensive usage and consistent usage 24/7. Obviously, the new way is to use a cloud infrastructure. You can spin up, spin down, build your environment as you like. But take what I've said back and add it all up. DevOps, Dev Security Ops, challenge of being fast and secure, challenge of being reliable, and having an onus on yourself by the cloud provider to be responsible for what you're building. If you add all that up, if you've got a DevOps person that's building out the environment, the database, the infrastructure, all these sorts of things, you're having one person that has the sole responsibility for what used to take 20, 30 people to do, right? And oh, by the way, I thought it was really anecdotal that I found this picture while I was doing some searching. A cloud infrastructure in actual containers, which, as you know, we were talking about Kubernetes here. I just thought this was novel, and I just wanted to share it as part of my presentation. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a smile. So from a cloud infrastructure standpoint, you've got a ton of services, a ton of value that's provided for you, and it makes sense, right? I think this audience knows well and knows intimately why kind of cloud is valuable. And as I mentioned before, with the responsibility comes different and varying levels of expertise that's needed as part of this, right? And so the good news is, depending on how you deploy or where you deploy, you've got multiple options of the way that you can deploy. And most of our customers are finding some sort of hybrid deployment. There's some on-prem, there's some public cloud hosted, there might be some private cloud that's a component of that. And the platform themselves, Azure, gives you the capabilities to get some visibility, gives you the capability or the understanding to allow you to have or move or work towards the secure and quick moving infrastructure and environment. So you've got managed security components that are available for you. You've got a catalog of various services that are available as part of the infrastructure that you're building out so that you can utilize and have the right amount of components or category, I won't use the word category, or services available for you to build out the environment in the way that you need. Everything from machine learning down to networking, down to blobs and storage of data. You've got a great application catalog that's available that is available for you through the Azure Marketplace as part of your Azure Services offering. So a lot of good content and rich content that's available for you to make and migrate your application to the cloud, which is all fantastic. So how do you take that and how do you do it well? Right? When I said that there's 20, 30 people that used to be involved with the process, now it's one DevOps person or one DevOps team that's building up this environment. We'll get into this later, but I wanted to touch on the fact that Microsoft provides you with what's called the well-architected pillars. There's 5 of them. They cover various different things from cost to reliability to security. And we'll get into those in just a moment, but I wanted to highlight this for you just so that you had a teaser for this as we're going through the presentation. The good news is that Microsoft does a fantastic job of giving you the opportunity to identify patterns and telling you what's happening with your environment. Obviously, with Azure, they're seeing millions, if not tens of millions of implementations of Azure in their environment or with their usage of services. So they see a lot that you don't. They have a lot of visibility. They've seen a lot of instances. They've spun up, spun down, created, destroyed, are thinking about creating different implementations that you or your organization don't have the visibility or don't have the understanding of just quite yet. So there's a great opportunity for you to partner with Microsoft to be able to do that. And you can do that with various patterns that are available for you as part of this. You can do that with various services that are available for you as part of this. And you can do that with what's called configurations. So with configurations comes the power, the ability for you to leverage the best practices of that well-architected, those well-architected pillars that I talk about, or the great architectural principles that Microsoft Azure or that Azure offers or gives you. Remember, tens of millions of implementations, they see this a lot. They're able to do and build this for you. So what are configurations, right? You can take and get a set of instructions on how to best build the environment out for the application that you're building. For example, if you're building a call center out, for example, if you're building a customer-facing website out, for example, if you're building a business application that has complex logic that's tied to data that needs to be served up, encrypted, or managed, you can take the best practices that are provided for you by the provider, by Azure in this instance, to be able to build out the best environment for you. You can do it via terminal, right? You can do it via command line. You can do it via console. You can do it, as you're going through and, kind of building out your environment. And you can even use infrastructure as code or software-defined infrastructure to build this out. Now, this is important because a lot of times, our customers are utilizing a set of templates, be it Terraform, be it some other template technology, and they're doing this to stamp out their environment, and they're using what's called infrastructure as code or a software-defined infrastructure to build out their environment. So they've done this many times. They want to stamp out an application. Hey, use this template to build it out. It's approved. It's been blessed by our organization. Here's the rub. How many times do you have environments that you're building out that are exactly like another environment? Maybe, a small percentage of the time, but the reality is there's some uniqueness and nuances to each application that's being launched in an environment. So when you're using software-defined infrastructure, you want to make certain that the infrastructure that you're using is as up-to-date as possible. You'll also want to make certain that any of the infrastructure as code that you're leveraging is up to date with various standards, with various compliance, with various patches, right? Patches were an important thing yesterday. So you want to make certain that all that is very much up to date. And what ends up happening for the most part with the build out of this sort of environment is that you tend to use antiquated, outdated, or not up to date environments with this. So remember, let's go back to that shared responsibility model, right? You've got a responsibility to do some stuff. Azure, Microsoft has a responsibility to do some other stuff, and there's a little bit of a hybrid mentality between where the lines are both blue and gray there. So where do you draw the line, and how do you know what to do? Well, the good news is with the configuration management that's provided to you by the well-designed or well-architected principles, you can take and understand what is your responsibility, the things that you care about, versus what the provider has given you and asks you not to pay attention to, or doesn't require you to care about. But what ends up happening here? Misconfigurations, right? So you can utilize, if I go back, you can utilize the tools and the sets. I should have had a duplicative slide here. You can utilize the tools and the sets of components that are provided for you by the security center, in this instance with Azure, and it's a fantastic way to get started. But as your environment gets more complex, and as more and more people get involved with your environment, you tend to have much more complex, out of scope, and unique services that aren't necessarily covered by the provider. Or remember, I said there is a multitude of hybrid environments that are set up there. The cloud provider isn't able to help you or Azure isn't able to help you with hybrid environments or multi-cloud environments. And for the most part, a large component of our customer sets that we see do have some sort of high compliance or high hybrid environment. So what we allow you to do is be able to go through and give you an N plus, an exponential number more of configuration related checks that can go and check the services that are provided for you by Azure against various best practices that are meant to be. And we kind of see this a lot. We at Trend Micro published a breach report that has to do with the top trends or security related predictions for 2020. You'll notice the third most popular trend that's there is misconfigurations compounding risks within the cloud. We also found a very similar finding. Well, I guess we didn't. The NSA also found a very similar finding that's tied to this. That said, 99 or a large percentage of breaches that are going to happen, or security-related issues that are going to happen, are going to be due to cloud misconfigurations. That report was published by the NSA in January. Something you can certainly, January 20th, kind of late January, something you can certainly go and look and see. Gartner, by the way, also predicts that 99% of the cloud configuration, or the breaches or the incidents that are tied to issues with configuration within the cloud, will be the customer's fault. What does that all say? It says that process that you had of the 30 people that was slow, cumbersome, laborious, and long really did have some value, right? It had value of an expert in database helping you with the database setup. It had a value of an expert in the operating system or the infrastructure, setting up the infrastructure. It had value in a middleware expert coming and teaching you and talking about the middleware and how things were. Private key management, encryption, libraries, application layers, all those things, the experts that are tied to that all had value. And I'm not saying that was necessarily a good thing that it took them 6 weeks to get your environment provision, but it is very, very valuable. And it's no secret that Azure in particular is just growing and growing with respect to the services. So Microsoft's only going to offer more and more capabilities and more features to their customers as they grow this portfolio. I think back in March, Azure had 775% growth year over year, just in March of 2020. So a lot of new features, a lot of more adoption. As part of your E3, E5 license, you're going to be able to get more and more benefits with Azure as part of kind of your build out. So there's more of this coming. The good news is what we're finding from a configuration standpoint is kind of the same of what we found from, you know, traditional misconfiguration issues. There's secrets managed, there's identity and access management issues, there's issues that are tied with storage and the way that storage is put out there. So if you've got a blob, or if you've got data that's unencrypted or meant to be encrypted in a particular methodology, you've got that misconfigured. And all this happens because, like I said, you're developing fast and you're not developing secure. So you haven't necessarily weaved in security into the DevOps pipeline or into the DevSecOps operational thing. The other thing that compounds this is that you have thousands of developers and only a handful of security architects, or only a handful of cloud architects. So remember, I said the automation needs to come into play. You don't have the level of automation that's required to be able to allow this small, nimble team to be able to do all the work that's coming down the pipeline for them. So it's important to understand, you know, we're still dealing with issues that are the same sort of traditional issues that we've had, and that you know, those issues are compounding based on the thousands of resources and team requirements that are being put onto people. And oh, by the way, you know, no governing regulation is going to take it easy on you just because, you know, you don't have enough resources. So it's important to know that, you know, fines and levels are increasing. So what does Trend Micro do that's different than what's provided already from the Azure or the cloud providing services that you have? Remember, I said that it's important to use and leverage what's provided to you and get the visibility that is given to you by Azure and the 10 million or tens of millions of implementations that they've done. It's also beneficial for you if you're in a multi-cloud environment, a more dynamic environment, or wants to drill deeper into those services to leverage the benefit and the value that comes from a third-party provider such as Trend Micro. And so what we do is we have a host of offerings that are available for you regardless of where you are in your cloud journey, whether or not you're just starting out your cloud journey or whether or not you're very, very mature and, you know, kind of considered a cloud native organization or a cloud disruptor. Typically, for the most part, we have organizations that fall somewhere in the middle, or we have organizations that are on different phases. So a marketing department or a more nimble department might be more cloud native versus a finance department and an IT department might be more cloud curious, cloud ready. If you don't think that you're ready for the cloud, or if you sit here thinking like, yeah, you know, we're not, odds are that a large percentage of your vendors or your third-party relationships that you have, third and fourth-party relationships that you have already, have your data and have it in the cloud, or have access to it, or have access and are provisioning it in such a way that your information, part of your information is kind of already out there, right? So wherever you are, you face the same set of challenges, right? You have a lack of visibility. There's drift in the environment that you're building out. There's continuous compliance needs that I said that are over you. And there's this sort of dynamicness that comes with agile development and the agile methodology, right? And so what we do at Trend Micro is we give you the capacity to be able to manage all this with, you know, one simple and easy to weave into your development operations process solution set. And so what we have is, you know, if you look at a traditional methodology from a development pipeline, you've got developers that are building code, submitting it to their build process, and then promoting that up to the environment. What ends up happening is they have issues that are tied with software-defined infrastructure. They have container issues. There's storage issues that have to deal with encryption or something that's truly not taken care of from a PKI standpoint. What we do is we implement as far and as early as in the development process as possible, and we weave in our methodology to be able to allow you to align to the best practices of the cloud provider, Azure's well-architected framework, in addition to the best practices of various compliance frameworks, in addition to the best practices of your organization, in addition to the best practices of your peer organizations, in addition to the best practices of yada, 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 right? I can continue on there. But you want to crawl, walk, run, right? You want to take the best practices that are recommended for you by Azure as it relates to the framework that they're trying to give you across the various pillars that they have. Everything, remember that I said, from cost down to security that's covered here, so that they can, and so that you can have the right set of visibility that's there and that is provided to you appropriately. But we all know that development, especially DevOps pipelines, happen in real time. We need the capacity and the ability to have the visibility that we're asking for in real time. And so one of the things that we do really well is we give you the what's called near real-time or real-time threat monitoring, so that you can go in and see as changes are happening in your environment within sub-tenths of a second to be able to respond to and tie remediations back to the various standards or frameworks, and give you the capacity to automate it. Now, I know you've got some change control processes and some issues in play that might not necessarily require automated software to be able to do things, but we can integrate and build this in such a way that we follow your change control processes and we do take care of things in a compliant fashion as it relates to the way that your organization needs to do things. So when you integrate security into DevOps, you cover, buzzword bingo, right? Software-defined infrastructure, shift left, all security as part of DevOps, all that sort of stuff. But one of the things that we encourage you to do, and this is a very simple slide, it's just text, but it's actually probably one of the most important pieces that I talk about, is integrate security in such a way that your developers don't know that you're integrating security. So integrate it with their ticketing systems, integrate it with their IDE or development environment, integrate it in with the manner in which your developers sit down to do their work and they have tickets that are tied to whatever. Oh, this ticket is tied to an app performance issue. Oh, this ticket's tied to encryption. And this ticket's tied to the configuration of the container that I put out there. But they're just bugs. It's not security. You don't have to have a security architect that's taking care of it. And when you integrate and weave in the process of security, you truly have a much more, I'll say, robust and a much more secure sort of environment. So this is the only slide that I have on our product. I try not to be too much of a commercial. With Cloud One Conformity, so the name of our product is Cloud One. The piece that handles configuration is called Conformity. And with Conformity, we're able to build on top of what you've already got in place with the Azure services, enhance them, weave them into your development processes, and overlay compliance, as well as any unique requirements from a business standpoint. We do this for tens of thousands of customers all over the world. We'd certainly be glad to speak with you and talk to you about how we can take all the things that I said and sort of build them into this process.